I think one of the most iconic statements in the Hebrew Bible, which is a book filled with iconic statements, has to be Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob, Mishnotecha Yisrael, your dwelling places, O Israel. Whenever I read these words, I feel uplifted. And of course, they've been emblazoned above the entrance of synagogues for generations. But who uttered these words? Well, it's in the Torah, it must have been Moses. No. These words were proclaimed by a pagan prophet, Balaam. Balaam ben Beor. We read about him in Parashat Balak. Now, it may seem strange that God would associate himself with a pagan anyway. But according to the rabbis, the nations of the world came to God complaining. It's not fair. You've given Israel the Torah, you've given them Moses, what have you given us? And so God said, you can have Balaam. But he was a pagan, even in his practice of prophecy. He's more like a soothsayer. He's got his bag of tricks, his symbols, his stars, bits of human body. And most importantly, he uses these to impress his customers, because Balaam's talents were for hire. And so Balak, the king of Moab, sends messengers, and says, look, I've got the Israelites encamped on my border. They're overwhelming. I cannot cope with them. Please come and curse them for me. I'll make it well worth your while. So Balaam consults with God, and God says no. But Balak is assistant, and he sends another group of ambassadors with even bigger promises. And again Balaam asks God, and God says, yes, go, but you must say only that which I put into your mouth. Balaam sets off, and God is angry with him. The reason being that God looked into his heart and saw that Balaam was determined to curse Israel. And so he's blocked his way with an angel that he cannot see, but the donkey can. And when at last the angel is revealed, he says to him, now look, I could have killed you here and now. So do as you are told. Balaam arrives in Moab. He meets Balak. Balak tells him his requirements. And so Balaam said, look, take me to a vantage point where I can look upon the Israelite camp. And there he sets up his signs and his bits and pieces, and he builds 7 altars, tells them to offer up 7 oxen, 7 rams, still number 7. He even instructs how they should stand over their altars. Hityat Seif Ko. Take a position like this. And Balaam turns towards his symbols and brings back a message. Ma'ekov lo kaboer, he says. How can I curse somebody who God doesn't curse? Ma'ezom lo zo'am Elohim, Adonai. How can I vilify somebody who the Lord doesn't vilify? Kimerosh suri merenu. I see this nation from the tops of rocks. Gvaot ashurenu. I behold him from the hills. En amel vadad yishkon. Behold, he is a people who lives alone. Uvagoyim lo yitchashav. And is not accounted among the nations. The nation of Israel is unique. You can't deal with them as with other people. Needless to say, Balak is not too happy with that message. So he takes him to another location. Again, puts up his signs and symbols. Again, 7 altars, 7 oxen, 7 rams. And once again, Balaam has a message for Balak. He says to him, Lo ish vichazei. God is not a man that he'll behave falsely. Uven adam v'yitnecham, or a mere human being who has regrets. Ha'u amar v'lo ya'aseh. Does he promise anything and not do it? V'diber v'lo yikimena, or utter anything and not fulfill it? We're talking about God. God made a promise to the ancestors of this people, to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, that he'd care for them, he would bless them, he would look after them. Do you think you're going to make him change his mind? Forget it. But then Balaam does make an admission. Now, strangely enough, in the Hebrew Bible, the word barech means to bless, as you know, but it also has the opposite meaning, to curse. And Balaam plays with the double entendre to make a confession. He says, Hine varech lakachti. I took it upon myself to curse them. I wanted to curse them. Uvelech. But God has blessed them. Lo ashiverna, and I cannot retract it. Needless to say, Balak is not too happy with that message, but he doesn't give in. Try another location. Again, the bibs and the bobs, the 7 altars, 7 oxen, 7 rams. Only this time, Balaam doesn't even bother to look at his bibs and bobs. He turns and faces the nation of Israel and utters the immortal words, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, mishkanotecha Yisrael. And at this point, Balak loses his cool and says to Balaam, I could have raised you a very rich man. Now, get out of my sight. Barach lecha. Flee from me now, if you know what's good for you. All right, says Balaam, but let me leave you with a parting message. And indeed, it's a very strange one. Because Balaam is one of the first people in the Hebrew Bible to prophesy the advent of the Messiah. 3,500 years ago, where the nation of Israel had just come out of Egypt, it was the dawn of their history. Balaam foretells the climax of their history. And he says, Er'en, I see this people, V'lo ata, but not in the here and now. Ashurenu, I behold him, V'lo karov, but not in the immediate future. What do I see? Darach kochav miyakov, a star shall tread forth from Jacob, v'kam shevet mi Yisrael, and the sovereignty shall rise in Israel. He was foretelling the rising of the Davidic dynasty. What does he mean by the star? The star is the luminary of the Messiah that will lighten our last days. And indeed, in our history, there was a claimant to the Messianic crown, lived in the days of Rabbi Akiva. His name was Shimon Bar Koziba, but he took the regnal name Bar Kochba. I am the son of the star. I am the Messiah whom Balaam prophesied. But I have an immediate problem here, you may have guessed it. Why is such an ominous statement, such a prophecy like this, emanating from the lips of Balaam, pagan prophet, ragbag man? These words should have been uttered by Moses. And indeed, how is it that it's Balaam who's saying, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov? Moses shouldn't be making such a declaration. So let me tell you what I think. God naturally could foresee our future. He could foresee that in the generations that lay ahead, the Jewish people would be vilified, demonized, degraded, dehumanized, right down to this modern age where the vitriol and the hatred have found a focal point in the little state of Israel. It is written to a crescendo of criticism, hurling every insult at the little Jewish state. The very word Zionist has become a dirty word in their mouths. And Israel is accused of being a fascist state, a Nazi state, an apartheid state. And even Jeremy Corbyn has to have his 5 penneth. And on the recent incident at the Gaza border, Corbyn chips in and says Israel was guilty of war crimes. How do you respond to this? Initially, I would like to see the state of Israel issue an invitation to all our detractors. Please, come, we'll pay your airfare, we'll put you in nice hotels, we'll give you a chauffeur-driven car to go wherever you want, on one condition. Please show us the location of the concentration camps where we are murdering, killing off tens of thousands of Palestinians. Please show us the crematoria where they're burning their bodies. Please show us the death camps where we are working poor Palestinians to death building our roads. Show us the evidence. Put up or shut up. And that's Israel being an apartheid state. Come into any hospital. How are Palestinian patients being treated? Separate from or alongside their Israeli citizens. There are Palestinian doctors as well as Israeli doctors. And if you go into the Knesset, there are Arab members as well as Israeli Jewish members. So how is this an apartheid state? As for Mr. Corbyn's claim, we all know what happened at the Gaza border recently. Hamas cynically drummed up a number of its innocent citizens to act as a shield, a body shield, so that their operatives could penetrate into Israel and do damage, hoping that a number of their innocent citizens, hopefully a child, would be shot. This would focus the world attention back on them. But even Hamas acknowledged that of the 62 people who were killed, 50 were Hamas operatives, 12 were innocent civilians. And even these would have to be accounted as collateral damage. And if, Mr. Corbyn, you call collateral damage war crimes, then please be aware that this Great Britain will be one of the greatest war criminals in history. During the Second World War, the RAF dropped thousands of tons of bombs on Germany, initially and legitimately to take out military installations. But tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians were killed. So if Israel is a war criminal, what does that make Britain? Let me give you a word of advice, Mr. Corbyn. If you have a glass house in your garden and you happen to be sitting in it, don't throw stones. And as for the future, I hope that they will arise when the nations of the world will emulate their role model, Balaam, and stand before the people of Israel and proclaim with one voice, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkanotecha Yisrael. O Jewish people, you are truly both inspired and inspirational. You are worthy to be a role model for mankind.